And welcome to the YouTube folks and Facebook folks. Welcome upstairs. Welcome to new people here. We didn't welcome you, I don't think, yet, so we're glad you're here. You've been hearing a lot of references of Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, and they are the founders of the Unity movement, so we will be bringing them forward a little bit more today. And we're bringing St. Francis of Assisi forward. I am. And some of you may say, why is she digging way back when in the 1100s of St. Francis? This prayer that many of you may know, the prayer of St. Francis, has been a prayer that I've worked with for nearly 20 years. And from my teacher, Ignatishwaran, he said that when we have a prayer that we work with, we put it in our minds, but then it needs to drip into our hearts and become our practice in our daily life. And so the prayer of St. Francis is, Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. I do this with my eyes closed often, so let me do that, and that'll ground me, okay? I do it in my meditation. So, Lord, let me start again. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I shall not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in the giving that we receive. It is in the pardoning that we are pardoned. And it is in the dying to self that we are born to eternal life. So if we live by that, the world would be a much different place, I think. And I want to focus today on the part of, for it is in giving we receive. Because that is what Thanksgiving's about. And it's a practice for me, that place of giving and finding out how we receive. And it lives in me and it's in my bones. St. Francis was a saint only because he was made a saint after his life, but he was just like you and me in so many ways. He was a humble man. He had troubles with his father, pretty big troubles, because his father was very abusive. He locked him when St. Francis felt the call to go to God, and his father was a rich, wealthy man in the village, and St. Francis ran away at one point, and when he came back home, his father locked him in a little cell, lock and key, for a long time, for many months. And then finally, when his father was out of the house, his mother let him free, and he was able to go follow his call. But he gave up the wealth and riches of his parents, of his family, to be able to really answer God's call. And that's where I am in my life, of trying to answer God's call. Myrtle Fillmore said, the practice of Thanksgiving should be every single day. It's not one day of the year. So while we're speaking about this today, our practice is to live it every day. And how is this applied in Unity principles is that we have this invitation from God to co-create a reality, right? To co-create reality that is different than maybe what we perceive it to be. And it is an invitation from God that's within us and outside of us and everywhere around us to step into that. So I'd like to share 2 stories. You may have seen in the announcement that I'm going to speak about a vegetable vendor, St. Francis, a widow, and a rabbi. And what do they have in common? I'll also weave my story in there too. So the first one is a vegetable vendor. Maher, who we've spoken about before, Sister Lucy, who many of you have met. Do you remember her? She has, in India, has a shelter for battered and abused women and children. And so this story comes from that. She has over 900 children now and several hundred women at any given time who are running for their life. Well, at Maher, they started receiving every week 15 kilos of vegetables. And it would come in, and they would send thank you notes to the address that it came from. And every single week, a new delivery of vegetables would come in. And so finally, after some time, over a year's period, they thought, we need to go meet who this person is and thank this person and find out how we can give back. And so they knocked on the person's door, and this man opened. It was a very wealthy man, and he said, well, it's fine you're thanking me, but don't thank me because it's not me who's giving you the vegetables. But it came from your address. I know. But the person that is delivering these does not want you to know who he is. He wants to be anonymous. And Sister Lucy tried as she might to get the information, but he was not budge. So the vegetables kept coming in every week, 15 kilos without fail. Season changed, the vegetables would change, and it would just come in all the time. And finally, the board of Maher said, we really need to find out who this is. So they went back to the rich man and knocked on his door again and said, we need to know. And after some time, he finally said, okay, I'll tell you. And so Sister Lucy and the board members went out to the settlement close to where they were. It's India. And they knock on the door. And they were shocked when this man opened the door because he lived in a small little room with his wife and 4 daughters. He was of the lowest caste in India. You know, the caste system that's there. He was the lowest of low, poorest of poor, lowest in the caste system. And Sister Lucy said, I looked at him and I thought, I should be giving him 15 kilos of vegetables every week. How in the world can you afford this? And he said, it is what I need to do. I'm a vegetable vendor, and we have the picture there of the vegetable vendor. They usually carry the vegetables on top of their head, and they're moving around, and he would save a little bit of the vegetables and send them to Maher every week, 15 kilos without fail. Lucy said, but your children, and he said, don't worry about my children. He pointed to them, and they were beaming and shining with radiant light and love, and he said, they have enough. They have enough. But what you are doing with your women and children is so important. So here's a man who wanted to remain anonymous and live into the spirit of giving. So come to Cynthia's story here. I'm a giving person. I think about this all the time. I'm practicing, and this was about nearly 20 years ago when I started my meditation practice. And my teacher was going through all the points of the program and saying, we must put others first. And I thought, you're a man, you don't understand. I'm a mother, I'm a single mother. I put everybody first. I'm always giving, always giving. I put myself first. I buy things for everyone else before I give to myself. What does he know? What's he talking about? And then in my meditation time, I started reflecting on it and realizing, and something came up for me of realizing the question of, why was I putting others first? Why was I giving? And what was I getting back? What was my expectation of what to get back? And that was quite shocking to see that in myself. So that became my practice, actually, to look at, because what I really was longing for was love that was empty in myself. I needed love. So it wasn't all the time. I gave freely, but there were several times that I would give to get. And so that was quite a wake-up for myself. So it's important in this giving and receiving of not being a doormat, as one would say. So there's times that we can give and give too much where it might be an abusive situation, and it's very important to be aware of those times. So there's times to have tough love and get out of situations when they aren't healthy or right. And I just need to name that as we go through speaking about how we give and how we serve and what we receive back. So this unconscious side of myself was happening in the fact that I was giving because I wanted to get. I needed to be fed. And what happened in that time when I realized it, and what my practice is now, is when those times come up, to be inwardly aware of what's going on there, and not to push it down, but to bring it up and go, oh, look at that. There it is, Cynthia. Why were you giving? Why were you there? Why were you serving? So it's a radical honesty, if you will. And there's a purification piece in it as well. So as I do that inner work within myself, it purifies that piece, hopefully, and comes into a new place of being. And I'd say over 20 years, I've gotten a little better. I've gotten a lot better, actually. So an example of this just happened a few days ago. We were in San Francisco for some meetings, and we had dinner with a colleague. And we walked out, and we had our takeaway box, of leftovers from food. We're walking down, getting to the BART, the public transport, and we're saying goodbye to her. And all of a sudden, and there's homeless people all around, and as I was going down the street, I was doing my holy name practice of, blessing the homeless and being aware. But then all of a sudden, we're standing there and talking and saying goodbye, and all of a sudden, this homeless man comes dancing up. And he's really joyful, and he's all toothless, and he has long hair, and he's looking scrungy as could be. And we're standing there with our boxes, and he said, "May I have your food?" And we kind of looked at each other, and then our colleague handed her food, and then we handed ours. But in that moment, just a split second within myself, I thought, wait a minute. Inside, I have plans for that food. That's my lunch tomorrow. So simple, right? Very simple, but it was an important acknowledgement within myself to say, even in that simple moment, I wanted it. I didn't want to give it. I did give it. And his joyful spirit, what a way to be greeted. I got a lesson in that, and he taught me something about how you can be joyful in any moment. There's an opportunity always to have that joy, even when you're homeless, even when you're wanting that food. So the gift of giving isn't always easy. Sometimes people are prickly. Sometimes they're stubborn. Sometimes we don't want to be around them. Give more. That's when it's important to give more. And move closer in if possible. Now you got to be mindful. You got to back off if they don't want you around. But also be sensitive to that and notice who you align with. Why am I coming up to this person but not going up to that person? Why am I praying for this and not praying for that? Is it political beliefs? Is it because they don't align, they don't think the same thoughts as you, they don't look like you, whatever it is. Why do I like this project better than that project? Why won't I dive into this? Why is it one person's job to clean the toilets and not another person's job, you know? These simple things of ways that we can extend. Gandhi was known for that too. His wife, I don't know if you know the story where his wife was, he asked her to go clean the toilets, or somebody did in the ashram, and she was so resistant. And he said, but that's what we do. We do everything that we need to do to serve. And so he did it. It almost came, I mean, it was a crisis in their marriage, you know, of how we serve and how we're going to be together in this. So I have another story, and that is also from Maher. This is a story of similar to the vegetable vendor. Every month, Maher received 100 rupees. That's about $1.80 Canadian. Every single month, this 100 rupees in a money order would come in. And month after month, and they had no return address, so they couldn't figure out where it was coming from, so they couldn't even thank the person. So they went to the post office, and they started trying to find out, and the post office said, no, we're not giving you that. Well, they went back. This went on for several years, that they couldn't find out who it was, but it was 100 rupees, which, you know, $2, big deal, but it was just so consistent. And so they went back to the post office again after some time. This is India. They were able to get the address and find out who was sending this money. So they appeared at this woman's door. She was a poor woman. She wasn't as poor as the vegetable vendor, but she was also very poor. And Sister Lucy said, how are you sending this money? You're so poor yourself. How are you coming up with this? And she said, it's very simple. My husband gives me a certain amount of money each week for the groceries and the household items. And so when I go to the grocery store, to the market, I look and I say, there's potatoes for 10 rupees and there's potatoes for 8 rupees. So I pick the potatoes for my family for the 8 rupees, and I put those 2 rupees coins in a tin for Maher. And then there's maybe bananas for 6 rupees and bananas for 4 rupees. And I take another 2 rupees and put it in a tin. And by the end of the month, I've got 100 rupees to send you. And that's my service to you. Again, this woman did not want to be known. She was anonymous up until this point. All she wanted to do was give. And she was the poorest of poor. So this reminds me of the story of the widow's mite that you may know of the woman in Jesus' time, gave the few coins that she had. So it was all that she had. She gave of her money, and it's in the spirit of what she was giving that came through the most for Jesus. It was in the spirit of the woman from Maher, that giving without wanting to receive, just because it was the right thing to do. So, to complete the story of the vegetable vendor and of the housewife, the poor housewife, Sister Lucy at one point came up. They had a building that needed to be inaugurated, and they were going to have this grand festival. And when in India, it's very grand. So they had a program of dance and music and food, and all the people coming out to hear about it, to find out, to dedicate this building. Well, the board said, who are we going to invite to be the keynote speakers? And they went through this whole process about it. And then Lucy said, I know who we invite. We invite the vegetable vendor and the housewife. And the board said, wait a minute, no, we can't do that. We have big donors who donated to this building. We have business people who have that right. We have the highest caste people that need to be the ones that are up there on the platform. And they had really struggled with this, but Lucy said, it is right that these people come up. They have given, like the widow's mite, they have given from the highest spiritual integrity, the highest place of giving. And so she said they also have a place of teaching. So these two people from the lowest caste who hadn't been ever wanting to even be known are all of a sudden invited to come forward and be the ones delivering that keynote. They never had spoken before on stage. They had never been invited to anything like this before. And Lucy said, no matter how little you have, there's always someone who has less. You can always find in your heart to give. But how many of us actually do this? How many of us go out of our way to give at this level? These two people did that. And there's a lesson for every one of us to learn in their giving. There's a lesson that her 900 children to learn because they are the lowest and poorest caste in India. And here they see people just like them uplifted in this place. So in doing this level of giving, for me, there's a field of gratitude that starts to be built, that we're invited into. And as we give, there is more that is given back. For example, with the vegetable vendor and the housewife, they were living their lives, doing what they do, but now all of a sudden they're belonging in a whole community of Maher. They have a whole new community that's giving back to them as well. So they were giving this opportunity. By giving, they were received back. Some of you may know Brother David Steinelrost. He's a Benedictine nun. How many of you know him? Yeah, a few. Okay. He's 93 years old now. He did a lot with the Christian-Buddhist dialogues of coming together. He also has a whole website, which I encourage you to look at, called gratefulness.org. Brother David says, grateful people are joyful people. The more and more joyful people there are, the more and more joy we have in the world. So how do we cultivate this joy at Unity? I think we're already doing it. I think we're in a place of doing that. I can tell you from my own experience, only having been here a few months, how I feel the presence of love and light and gratitude and service in this community. And we can always do more. So I encourage us to adopt a practice, because I'm all about practice, and you've heard me say that before, a practice of gratitude. So when you're moving through the next few weeks or days, years, or your lifetime, as Myrtle Fillmore would say, because Thanksgiving is more than just this day, then extend yourself just a little bit further to do a little bit more to give. And I don't know what that looks like in your life. I can only speak about what it is in my life. But there are moments that you can find to do that. And at moments when things are tense and challenging with someone, how are you going to shift that energy? How are you going to change that and move it into one of gratefulness? Because every moment is an opportunity for us to give and give again and give again. And in that relationship of giving, it's not I and you, it's I, you, and thou. It's I, you, we, and thou. There's actually some research. Well, first I want to just say that there's many of us in this community, many of you in this community, that tithe. And that's a really beautiful way of giving. It's a beautiful way here at Unity of giving, is tithing. And I think many of you have experienced this, that when you tithe or you give service, that what you get back is unexpected. It's much larger than you would even have ever imagined. So recognize that. Be in that space of what that feels like. And when those moments come up where it's uncomfortable, where maybe inside you're going, like Cynthia did with the homeless man, that I really didn't want to do that, then don't shove it down, don't push it down. Be radically honest with yourself. And know that's an opportunity to start shifting that little part in myself, rubbing the rough edges off, if you will. So there is some research I just want to quickly name by James Fowler from the University of California, San Diego, and Nicholas Chrysikis, I think is his name, of Harvard. It was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science. It shows that when one person behaves generously, it inspires even the observers to behave generously later toward different people. In fact, the researchers found that altruism could spread by 3 degrees from person to person to person to person. As a result, they write, each person in a network can influence dozens or even hundreds of people, some of whom you don't even know and you haven't even met. So when I think about our community here and what is possible in that way, we're already doing it, and what I think we can always stretch ourselves to give more, to be more love, to be more light, to be more generous. And let's see what comes back to us. So I'll complete with, because I've talked about the vegetable vendor, I talked about the widow's mite, I've talked about St. Francis. What's left? The rabbi. Some of you may have heard this story before, and it comes from the Jewish tradition. It comes from a rabbi, Hamin, but it has other sources as well. So there's a holy person sitting next to the Creator, and they come to 2 doors, and the holy person is saying, Creator, what is the difference between heaven and hell? And so these 2 doors are there, and the Creator says, open that door. So he opens the door, and inside he looks around in this room, and there's a circle of people sitting there, and there's a huge pot of soup. And the people are looking very, very malnourished. They're looking very gray and unhappy. But there's this huge bowl of soup. How could this be? Well, and they all had spoons, but the spoons are very, very long, and they dip their spoon in, and then they're trying to feed themselves, and they can't get the spoon over to their mouth. And so they're malnourished. They're not able. And they close the door, and the holy man says, Creator, that was so difficult to see. How could that be? And he said, well, open this door. He said, that was hell. Open this door. And he opens the door. Same setup, same size room, same big pot of soup. But there's all these people, they're thriving, they're happy, they're just living life to the fullest, they're engaged, they're belonging with each other, have the same spoons, but this time when they dip it in, rather than trying to feed themselves, they feed each other across the circle. That was heaven. That is heaven. So as we move into our time downstairs and our time coming up in the days ahead, those are just a few stories for you to take into your own heart. Take in the prayer of St. Francis, for it is in the giving, it is in giving that we receive. And these are the ways that we can flourish in our own lives and in our community. So my closing remark is to give, and give more until it hurts. Because when we give so much, our heart expands to such a degree that we cannot know anything more than the experience of giving, the experience of loving. May it be so.